Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share insights on what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fumey, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Welcome, Nick Vojinovic.
Very good, Frank. Frank Victor Fumey Jr.
Yes, sir. From Little Greek. Nick and I have known each other, it's about 20 years.
Yes, when the third was coming through Sprouts.
Yes. When my son was coming through your wife's preschool program.
Exactly. He was valedictorian too, by the way. I think so. That's why I knew that there's success.
Now, if Frankie was listening to this, he would say I wasn't a valedictorian of anything related to school.
We're the guys who made valedictorians possible, right?
Now, wait a minute. We're both Tampa Bay guys, but before, where are you from originally?
Pittsburgh. I grew up. My dad got a last-minute scholarship from Belgrade, Serbia, to go to Cornell for a master's in engineering.
Nice.
And my mom was pregnant with an older brother at the time. Mm-hmm. He got his degree, and a family friend somehow managed to get him citizenship. They moved. My dad worked for U.S. Steel Research in Pittsburgh, and that's where I was born, and my younger brother, Greg, as well.
Wow. Now, what brought you down to the Tampa Bay area?
Well, basically through my career, went to Cornell for hotel restaurant management, kind of bounced around, made a lot of mistakes as far as early career choices. Kind of got a break with some Chili's guys, the Sun State Ventures, which had the southeast part of the country, and the partners were Chris Sullivan and Bob Basham from Outback. When Brinker bought Florida, Georgia, that's Chili's, Chris and Bob decided to go to Outback Steakhouse. My guys decided to do Beef O'Brady's, and that was my big break in my career. Up to then, I'd been doing mostly operations and then recruiting and training.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Nick, you're a legend in franchising, man.
When you're old, that's the key there. If you're old and you're still working, you go, okay, he's a legend.
They call it just a legendary status.
Yeah, that's right.
But Beef O'Brady's, I mean, that is a staple here in the Tampa Bay area for sure.
We had a great run. It was a really lucky kind of break. When Chuck and I came on board, Jim Melody had taken it to about 30 stores, but kind of like I think you see sometimes the founders kind of get stuck where they this is as far as I can go. And so Chuck came in. It was a really kind of a tricky deal. We bought in as partners with Jim, and we took it from 30, and kind of took me a year to sell my first deal. And then over time, we were doing 20, 30 deals a month. We were kind of the hot sports concept. And one of the mistakes, we grew too fast. We were doing 50 stores a year, almost one a week. And, it gets kind of a stressful deal. But it was a great run from 30. And then I worked my way up from VP, senior VP, chief operating officer to president. And, and then ultimately, and you and I kind of talked a little bit too about, hey, the chairman said, let's maybe sell, take some chips off the table. We did have an option to buy it back. But when the economy turned, the private equity firm said, hey, you guys are out. And it was kind of a tough time where you kind of go, and I think you and I talked about this a little bit as well, where, this is kind of your baby, and all these franchisees, their kids and their mom and all the whole thing. And all of a sudden, you're out. And you have 50 corporate employees, and you're out of there too. So it was really difficult. So I ultimately, one of the things I tell students is when I do my 20 of my top 100 career mistakes is kind of write down your goals. And I did have a goal of getting my master's degree, and that's where I went to USF. Got my executive MBA, and then while I was there, I realized my strength is kind of growing small franchises to bigger. I didn't like beefs when we got so big, doing $270 million in sales. And Nick, you're not allowed to talk to the franchisee. You got to go through the VP who talks to the director who talks to the franchise consultant. Because I was like the nice guy. So
of course,
you know the deal. Yeah, you've been there too. You know the story where it's kind of your baby, and you kind of take this little embryo and you grow it, and then sometimes it gets to be this teenager or adult. It's kind of a whole different animal.
Right. Well. And I know our topic is going to go totally in that direction. Sure. I sense it going there. Yes, and, I guess we should just go there right now.
Yeah.
So it is different. I think people that are listening, we have two really types of audiences, right? Mm-hmm. We have folks that are interested in buying a franchise, and we have people who are actually emerging franchisors. Mm-hmm. And really, whether you're a franchisee or you're a franchisor, there is an exit in your future at some point. Right. You're going to sell at some point, and there's a lot at stake there.
Yeah, it is. And I know you had a great run. It's so fun to see your success. From being in Brandon. You were in Brandon, weren't you? That area, and then we grew up there too. So I got to see your signs, and then I start traveling. Go, there's signs over in I think Dallas, Texas, or whatever. I started seeing I-9. I go, that's crazy. So it is. Yeah, it is a challenge though, that is one of the things almost going in is what is your exit? And certainly with Beefs, it was very painful for me to leave, where I think with Little Greek, my plan here is I'm taking one of the neat things that they did at Beef O'Brady's, they allowed me to vest in 10% as a partner. And that kind of changed my life. And so, one of those pay it forwards, which I think you're doing here by, doing these wonderful podcasts, helping other people out. So Brian St. George was a trading director for us at Beefs. And so now he's my chief operating officer, and we're investing him in 10% partner over 10 years as well. My son works for our company. So I think on my end, and maybe we can chat about it a little bit, I don't see us selling it, although there is a certain life cycle that all concepts have. I think I-9, I don't see it ever going away. Some restaurant chains have gone away, but like Quiznos or whatever. But hopefully, Little Greek, because we're still kind of early on the Mediterranean. I think it has good legs, and hopefully there's a good long-term play there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it is. It's interesting as a founder. Most of us don't go into a business or a president of a company. We don't go into thinking, I'm going to just leave. I'm going to leave someday. We have a dream. We have a vision on how big it's going to be. But when that day hits us, and it hits all of us, that there is a time where I think I'm not getting my own personal growth. I don't think I'm contributing. And a great example would be what you shared, that when they're telling you, look, Nick, you can't talk to the franchisees anymore. Now, they didn't tell me that, but I didn't feel like I was contributing like I had been. And the company was exploding, so don't get me wrong. I had everything you could possibly want. I had a great team that was doing everything you could possibly need to do in the company. But because I wasn't needed, just having a chairman role and being the poster boy of the company, that wasn't going to do it for me.
I like being the poster boy. I like everybody else do all, but Brian does all the tough legal stuff, because that's not my strength. I'm more the sales guy. But I'm kind of joking a little bit too. But it is kind of weird too, where you kind of, you have this little mixed bag deal where you want to be involved, but sometimes the more involved you get, it kind of actually messes things up a little bit for other folks as well. And I remember they talked about Norman Brinker, like going to visit a restaurant and make a little offhand comment, and next thing you know, the whole company is doing off on some tangent because of some comment he made, and he didn't really mean for that to happen either. Too. So it is, I guess that is something where, the emerging franchisors, that is part of the plan is what is your long-term strategy, and you do need to kind of get that on the board. And I guess the other part would be, and I don't know how you feel about this, Frank, but for a franchisee, it's sometimes tough for them, because they signed up, they were in love with you. That's why they signed up to I-9 and some Beefs and Little Greek. And I know I have franchisees that say, hey, are you going to leave? Because it's a different world. I know I'll have to say, like with Beefs, Chris Elliott's a great guy, but definitely a very different culture of his regime versus what we did at Beef O'Brady's. And sometimes it's tough for franchisees as those moves happen as well.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And also depends on when you were a franchisee, right? Because the early adopters, those are the guys that are risk takers. Yeah. And those are not easy, right? Yeah. It's not easy to be a franchisee of an early concept.
Right.
And of course, those that become a franchisee in the 100 to 200 range, they look different. Their traits are different, right? They expect more systems and processes, and they expect the model to be really, really proven.
Dialed in, yep.
But regardless of what phase they come in, they probably, I don't know if they think enough about the leadership of the concept.
Right.
Like, what's the longevity of this leadership? Are they going to be around, and will it even matter?
Yeah, that's a great point, because most franchisees coming in, they got stars in their eyes, and they say, I want to own my own business, which is great, and they love the I-9, Beef O'Brady's, Little Greek, and they want to get in that way, and they really, they realize that when we sign these deals, these go on, I guess, for life. We have people now, Beef O'Brady's with kids taking over from their parents' stores, and Little Greek, we have now our first round of 10-year renewals. The franchise agreements are meant to go on in perpetuity. And actually, when you're doing leases, I don't think I-9 you have to sign leases, but with ours, you have storefronts. And so we try to set up the leases to where, 10, 20, 30 years, we can still be there. So I know, like for instance, when private equity came in, and I know with I-9 and at Beef O'Brady's, they have a 5-year horizon. They're not in it for the long haul, and they're going to get in. They want to make their money and get out and move their money to the next deal. So it is a different strategy. And so sometimes I see franchisees at Beefs now dealing with their second or third regime of different strategies. Now they've kept the same leadership. Sometimes they bring in whole different leadership teams. That's where it gets really crazy. I like the fact that I-9, Scott's he's still the guy, right?
Brian Sanders. Brian's still the guy. Yeah, and the whole team really. And
that hats off to your acquisition.
Well, Roar Capital purchased I-9 back in 2021, and I give them a lot of credit because they did keep the team in place. And I think they also realized that the level of success that I-9 Sports has had over the years, you got to credit the team.
Yep.
And I think, different private equity firms treat it differently. But I think the ones that do it right realize, like, hey, we have services that we can roll up, of course. The centralized services are important, but there's the heart and soul of the business that's important to keep in place.
Right. That's they get it. I think they're one of the there's some of them are just in it for the money, and some I think work tends to hold for long term too. Right? I think
so.
Yeah. Cool. Good.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I think so. That's
good.
awesome.
Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about Little Greek.
Sure.
So you came on what year?
2012. I was still getting my master's degree. Chris Lewis, a local fellow, had told me, Nick, you need to look at 100 deals. I said, nah, I'll be able to find it pretty easy, small franchise company. And he was right. I looked at 80 different concepts: burrito, pizza, yogurt. No sports. That's not my gig. But and I do feel like kind of stick to your knitting, like stay in your areas of strength where you can bring a lot of value. So. But it took about a year. The local guy named Paul Sampson, I don't know if you know, he has, and at some point might be good for you, he's a kind of a brilliant franchising guy. Right now he has West Shore Pizza. And Paul has a consulting firm, which, it'd be good for you guys to meet, but he one of his clients was Little Greek. And I'd say, Paul, what do you think about this burrito concept? And then we talk about it, or other concepts, and he'd give me his feedback. And he kept saying, one of my clients is Little Greek. They have 4 locations. Sigrid, the founder, is a great gal, but she kind of needs somebody to take it to the next level. 3 locations in Tampa, 1 in Dallas. 2 were franchise. The Dallas store and the Palm Harbor store were franchise stores. So I went to visit the one over on Almerton Road. Terrible location. People were lined up out the door. I'm like, this is kind of cool. There's no national. I'm not going head to head with Five Guys or Starbucks. There's no national brand in the Greek. It was local. They already had franchise docs done. The FDD was already there, and they had some franchisees kind of underway. And the stores were performing well. And so, actually, Paul kind of set up a deal where we said it. I kind of structured similar to what we did at Beef O'Brien, 70-30. I was the majority partner to keep the Jim Melody and Sigrid were the 30%. And I said, hopefully, we'll get a good run and it'll work. And Sigrid and I, we had lunch the other day and say, hey, 12 years, it's still running. So it's been a great run. And I kind of tried to fix some of the mistakes we made at Beefs, where we grew too fast. All cash deals, keep the investment low. Our investments around. If we can find a shutdown restaurant, we can get open for $200,000. Including franchise fee. If you want to build it from scratch, it's going to be $400,000 or $500,000. And instead of doing it in 3 or 4 months, it's going to take 6 months, 9 months, because you got an architect. And these days, permitting and getting equipment, takes a long time. So I try to build the model. We don't do any advertising for franchise sales. We don't do any advertising for the stores. So we don't even collect a marketing fund. It's all organic. People come in, they like the food, they come back. That's why I brought you and Anthony some food, because hopefully we'll get some good plugs from you guys. But it's great. It is great food. It's healthy, it's different, and it's really tasty. And that's kind of what's really allowed this company to kind of grow.
That's great. Yeah. How many franchise units do we have now?
We're at 50. It's kind of we have one we just opened one at Tropicana Field, so we're kind of counting that one too. So I don't know if that's fair.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's good fun to go see the Rays. It's a good deal. Yeah. So we're in 6 states. Mostly, our biggest penetration would be Tampa 18, Orlando 12, Dallas 12, and then we have 6 up in the Midwest.
How big is big? What's kind of the vision for the brand?
Well, it's a good question. I do feel that this segment could be 1,000 units, and you see Cava's kind of making a move there. My goal would be to go up to 100 in the next 10 years. So at Beast, we were doing 50 stores a year, and it was just a lot of stress, a lot of pressure. Little Greek, we're a couple of stores a year. So really just want to be slow, steady growth. Just nothing real. My key thing is, one of my regrets at Beast was just during that downturn where people had to close stores. I don't want to have that here. And we've had, in the 10 years, we've had a handful of stores not make it. Some were health issues. Lease was up. They wanted to move on in their life. And that's kind of what we try to do here, is where go in low, keep your costs down. We wait. Sometimes we've been waiting for Brandon. We don't have a site there. We've been waiting for 10 years. We just can't find the right deal on Brandon. So not pushing the growth so fast. And sometimes you get caught up when as a franchisor, we got to do a deal, got to do a deal, got to do a deal. And I-9's a little different kind of, because you guys have more of an area where us having the right location in a retail is extremely important. So that's one of the things we try to do.
One of the many reasons why I was excited to bring you on here is your expertise in franchising, not just about Little Greek, and the thoughts that, what are your thoughts on where franchisors go wrong?
Yeah,
with growing and the part of growing too fast. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I made a lot of mistakes, and so there's so many things that you can do wrong. And I do feel for folks who try to get out and just start franchising for the first time, because you've never been there. And even at Beef O'Brien, we had Chuck Winship, our CEO, was Steak and Ale, Bennigan's, Yale graduate. We had pretty bright people with a lot of background. We still made mistakes, and so some of the things we did was just growing too fast. we had a good model and we let the model change. And so when I first started Beefs, and we let it go from a $200,000, $300,000 investment up to $600,000 or $700,000. So also the numbers start getting a little wonky there. And as far as site locations, one thing Chuck taught me is sometimes when you do a site, you got to think long term. We had a store over in, I think we call it Valrico, kind of going out on in Brandon, past towards like Riverview, or not Riverview, Plant City. And so it was a great site. It was a Winn-Dixie Center, NCAP, and there's a vacant space in front. Well, I didn't think that 5 years from now, Steak and Shake's going to come in there and block the view. So those are the things where I guess think long term and realize that when you sign up for a franchise, when you sign up for a franchisee, and also when you become a franchisee, these are long-term, 10-year, 20-year relationships. And you're like family. Good or bad, you're going to have to work together. And so look at that, look at your business for the long term and also look at your relationship with the franchisee or the franchisor or for the long term as well, because it's very important that it's always going to be some tension as a franchisee and franchisor, but you got to work together. We're in it for the long haul. You're not going anywhere.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, that's a tough deal sometimes.
We hear the old cliche, in business for yourself, but not by yourself. We've heard that, for decades. And while that is true, having the franchisee having the right traits is key, because not everybody is cut out to be a franchisee.
Exactly. Yeah.
What is the characteristics of a Little Greek franchisee?
Yeah,
what does that look like?
Yeah, great question. I'd love to get your I-9 take as well. Yeah. But one of the things I found out the hard way for us is we looked at our key values, and one of them is passion. We want people that are passionate about the brand. They're if you say, hey Nick, I'm looking at a Jiffy Lube or Little Greek, so you're not our guy or gal, because we do best with owner operators, and there are some brands where you can be the franchisee and hire some people, and they can do it. I think like maybe Sports Clips, for instance. I think they have a model where you have 3 stores and you don't have to cut hair or anything. Mm-hmm. But with Little Greek, our best people are the ones who love the brand. Oh, I love your food. 70% are from other countries. They're from Estonia, Bosnia, Serbia, Greece, Egypt, Lebanon, and they're hardworking folks, but they're kind of they're part of their vibe anyhow, the Mediterranean, and they're not in, like when they start, they're in it every day, but like I just saw one of our guys panel. I just stopped out to get your food and what a great story. This guy came over as a cook, and then he was a key employee, and then a general manager. He scraped together some money from his folks, and they opened a store in Trinity. Now he has 3 kids, a house, a car. He's a success story, but he's in there every day. He was up there. He's in the store. He's involved. We see people, they sign up and they spend all this money. They don't even go through the training program. And so as a franchisor, you're trying to evaluate that, but you only have a couple of days with them to kind of get that feel. And I go, why would you spend all this money and not even go train? I mean, it's free and and do it. And then they open a store and they're not there. I go, you have to be there. A manager doesn't really care at the same level as an owner. They're not going to go the extra mile to go out in the parking lot and find that customer who left without whatever, bottled dressing or whatever that they forgot behind. And so for me, the franchisee being committed and passionate, that's kind of the key. Because you don't have to be rocket, that's one of the beauties is I-9, we have a model. And if you follow the model, you should be successful. Now, people say, how much money can I make? Well, how hard are you going to work? Are you going to be there 3 hours a day? Are you going to be open to close? And are you going to go out to the community and promote your store and visit and talk to customers? Oh, you're the Little League, you're the I-9 here. Give out some free passes, stuff like that. So that's kind of where those are the folks who do real well. And there's other folks they just want to kind of get by the bare minimum. That doesn't work.
Yeah, I agree. With I-9, passion is number one, of course.
Right.
It's a sports for us is a blessing and a curse.
Right.
It's a blessing that because our business was sports, it attracted so many people. They knew something about it. They loved it.
Everyone, who doesn't like sports, right? Yeah.
The curse was that it was sports and that people knew something about it.
Yeah.
So you wanted to make sure you had people, though, that realized it was business first.
Yeah.
If they got caught up in knowing too much about sports, or I should say, not knowing too much about sports, if they got caught up in the rules of the game, the things that were not important to them as a franchisee, truthfully, I mean, they have to focus on management, marketing, finance, accounting, operations, technology. Those are the things that make the machine work.
Right.
And having passion for sports and the families and the kids is absolutely critical, but you can't be focusing on whether it's a fair catch is,
Right. What's the ruling on
what
that
are the
play?
rules? Right. Is it 2 feet in, inbounds? Is it completely, like, who cares about that?
Yeah.
The rules of the game as a franchisee, they're irrelevant. That is irrelevant. That's not for you. That's the site coordinator. That's already handled. But if you start focusing too much on the rules of the game, then you have your eye looking at the wrong, the wrong thing.
The analogy would be for Little Greek is, I love food and I love my chef. That's not why you're coming here, because we'll let you do some specials, but that's kind of the least of your issues is being a good food person. It's really more you're running a business, and you got to love it because you're in it every day.
Yeah, you can't, and we would emphasize that, saying, yes, you can love sports, you can love kids, but at the end of the day, this is your life, right? This is a business. It's relying on you. It's a breathing, living thing, and you have employees that are they're living off of you. I mean, you're responsible for them.
Yeah, and that is kind of the blessing and curse too. Employees can really drive you crazy, and customers. But isn't it kind of cool how many people that you've created, Frank, where you kind of built their house because of your business model and things, and all their employees that go through that. That's one of those things where, as a franchisor, you don't really see it, but it really is very rewarding to see people become successful.
It's amazing.
And it really is fun to see the folks who kind of work their way through. Some folks have a kind of a better hand of cards that can play than others. And to see the scrappy ones come in and just scraping them through and getting together, that's just really a lot of fun.
I love the scrappy ones, the underdogs, the people that came into our office in Discovery Day, and they just had, the best way I could put it is, they had the eye of the tiger. You knew that they were going to be successful. There was just something about them. They had that. The it factor. And a couple of franchisees, come to mind when I think about that. And then what I would say is hunger is the number one trait you need to be successful in any business. Right. So it was that eye of the tiger that those folks had. I had mixed success with people that the franchise was purchased for them by their parents or their grandparents. Did you experience the same thing?
Same thing. When you have people that don't have skin in the game, it's not the same thing. Right. And so, people say, I'm going to do this. And we had a situation where my son's going to run it. Well, son, we have our first employee meeting. He's late for the employee meeting. I go, your son cannot be late for his own employee meeting. I mean, it's just not going to work. It's ultimately that. But what we try to do, and see, yours a little different deal, because with restaurants, you have a much bigger investment, I think.
Sure.
Yeah. And so what we try to do, if we get them in relatively inexpensively on the investment side, then other franchisees will buy them out and kind of clear up the mess, kind of a thing. And so fortunately, that situation, the franchisee sold it, got all his money out. Another franchisee came in, and the sales have doubled and that's what we see. And I don't know if you've seen it on your side from Frank with I-9, but you can take exact same store, same location, same equipment, almost the same employees, and put another person in there, all of a sudden sales double. I mean, that's back to your point is they're hungry. Are they out there talking to customers? Do they want the business? We've had some people, they turn their phones off. They turn the catering, the Uber Eats on. I go, it's crazy.
Yeah, I agree with you. The thing is that this business and any business, we don't know what's going on in people's personal lives. Right. You get somebody who could be an ideal franchisee come through your door and you're thinking they're going to be great, but we don't know that they're going through stuff. And maybe it's the right franchisee, but the wrong time for them.
That's a great point.
And I experienced that. I'll never forget, early on, I had a guy tell us that Phoenix was never going to work for I-9 Sports because, and I quote, everybody goes away in the summer. So it's not going to work. Well, okay, even if everybody leaves in the summer, they come back in the fall and spring. But we end up exploding. And this franchisee left. He was one of the early adopters. Right. And the business grew. When we brought 2 new franchisees in, it absolutely exploded. And then the other, my other favorite was that we were told early on, I-9 Sports will never work in Texas because in Texas, they expect real football, tackle football. So flag football will never work.
Yeah,
and that was wrong.
Yeah,
that was wrong. Texas and Florida, the 2 biggest states for I-9 Sports, but more importantly, Texas very much works, and not everybody wanted tackle football, as it turns out, but we did more than flag football.
Yep. Well, that's where it goes back to too, is you do have to have folks who are willing to kind of follow the program, and they're not trying to break, don't come on board as a franchisee if you want to, we had a group in New York, well, we're going to change your Dolmades recipe, and we're going to do, I go, that's not You're not, that we don't need that. I mean, that's part of why you sign up is we've vetted these things, we've tried these things, and we just realize it doesn't work. And just stick to the model. And you to your point, I like what you said. Be hungry. Go out and talk to your customers, and go out in the community, and go out and then you really have to take good care of your staff, because that's the other piece of the business is if you can have a great crew, this thing should run itself. I mean, that's the goal of the game too. So
definitely, I think the franchisee or franchisor's limiting beliefs is what hurts them. So for our case, the limiting belief was it's not going to work in this area. Well, you're right. It's not going to work in this area because you believe that.
Yeah. Well, there is always that for me in the restaurants. And I'm not sure if this is the same with your business, but being the pioneer location in a new market is always a challenge. We had a store, Beef O'Brady's, we had a tough time in Dallas. And when I bought Little Greek, there was a franchise group in Dallas, and they were doing like only $5,000 or $6,000 a week. I go, oh boy. But these guys were, to your point, hungry, scrappy. And the Rosens got out, and they were doing Groupon, they were doing promos with the Cowboys, and now they've multiplied the sales by 5, and they've built up that market. So it is. I will say, if you were talking to me, being that pioneer franchisee is tricky because you go Tampa, everybody knows, well, not everybody, but we have the support here. We have brand awareness in Tampa, Dallas, Orlando, but you're the first one in North Carolina. It's always a trickier deal because we have to get supply chain up there. I don't have employees I can run over. I can't stop by and just help you out a little bit. So it is harder in restaurant industry. Those pioneer markets were always the most difficult because the person planting a flag also has a bigger challenge than, like you said earlier, store number 10 or 20. It's a different ballgame.
So is your expansion plans generally kind of regional?
We do, but it is kind of odd where in the franchising, sometimes they pick you. Since we don't do any marketing, it's like, hey, we have a guy, Thad, great operator from Little Rock. His family's from Tampa. They were down here eating, and they go, oh, we're doing. So now we're in Little Rock and Fayetteville. It's just how it works. So it's kind of and I don't know, how did you guys do I-9? Did you use the franchise sales companies, or did you do advertising? How did you guys grow?
Well, when we started, I was the one selling franchises.
Same with me. Oh, that's me. That's me. All of us.
You know what? If you are a founder of a franchisor and you're starting out, I think it is a great thing to do.
Oh, you got it. Yeah.
Because you need to know how to sell your own franchise, because how can you possibly coach somebody else, even if you bring in an experienced franchise salesperson, or you farm it out to an FSO, you want to hear what prospects are saying first and foremost. And maybe not everybody's cut out to be a franchise salesperson.
Right.
But I my background was sales in the past. But as a founder, I wanted to know what was going on. So when I sold the franchises early on, again, this is what do as I say, not as I did, as I do.
Yeah.
We registered in every state out of the get-go.
Okay, yeah.
We were going to go complete coast to coast.
Yeah.
And what do you think happened? We're opening up franchises in, of course, Florida, but California and Arizona and Washington and New York, and we are all over the place. And it created a bit of a nightmare for us early on.
Spread your team out. And
it really spread us really, really thin. Plus, we did not have, at that time, demographic data to know whether this is really a right location. We didn't have the proper territory sizes, so we gave away territories that were too big early on.
Interesting.
I made all the classic new franchisor mistakes, but we learned over time. And fortunately, we had a strong enough brand, a strong enough concept that people related to it. But we were learning on the fly. You know that old saying that entrepreneur is someone who jumps off the cliff and builds the plane on the way down.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I had, pieces of the plane were everywhere on the way down, but we did figure it out. But it is interesting, franchisors, if I had to do it all over again, I think I would have grown more regionally. Maybe I would have started in the Southeast.
Right.
Not necessarily for branding, but maybe just to have my act together.
Right.
It's not a right or wrong thing. I don't know. What
I totally agree with you. Because it's certainly much easier to help out folks who are geographically nearby. Now, I don't know if it's the same. One thing I was wondering, how did you create I-9? Was there anything else like it out there? And I hope you don't mind, Anthony. I'm kind of doing, but it's always fascinating. We go, where the heck did you come up with that idea? Because at least with me, I have a little template. Okay, there's restaurant franchising. Here's your playbook. But how did you come up with that? So
I ran an adult men's softball league in Long Island. That's
a brutal. You were the commissioner?
I was the commissioner of the league. It started because I was the guy in college who managed my college buddies. They were the ones that said, hey, we want to play in a softball league, but we don't want to manage it, so we're going to give you the money and you go get us in the league.
Right.
So I was that guy.
Okay, cool.
And I found that a lot of the leagues that were out there were run really, really poorly.
Yeah.
And they've been around 20, 30 years. So I started running a men's softball league in Long Island.
No
I was in
way.
medical sales. That was my career.
Wow.
And I hated my medical sales career in New York City. And I loved running this men's softball league and started making money. And it grew and grew and grew. And then my wife and I moved to the Tampa Bay area in 1996. And the interesting thing is that in 1998, Nick, the NFL announced that they were going to offer flag football for kids as a way of promoting the game of football.
Right.
And I knew how to run sports leagues. So I had hundreds of men's softball teams by then.
Got it.
So I had my system, but I knew nothing about kids. Like my daughter was born in 1998. So I didn't know. The only thing I knew about running a kids league were the things that I saw in the media. And that back then it was the, soccer dad choking out the other dad.
Excuse me.
Oh
yeah. All the brutal,
the assaulting the assaulting that would happen on at the hockey rink between parents.
Sure.
So I have like all this negative experiences in my head. So believe it or not, when I started my kids' flag football league in Brandon, I almost had like a chip on my shoulder. When parents would call to register their kid, I would start out like this. Okay, now let me tell you about this league. It's about fun, safe, and convenience. There's no drafts. There's no tryouts. I was basically giving them like a warning.
Like don't join if you're not going to be stepped up.
Like don't act up.
Right.
But what I was hearing on the other side was, from moms in particular that were calling, they were like, wow, this is exactly what I've been looking for.
Wow.
I was coming at them like, hey, I don't want trouble here.
Right.
And they were responding with this is exactly what I want. So we started running our kids' flag football league, and we got 3 locations in the Tampa Bay area. And then it was, how do we grow this thing as a franchisor?
How'd you know about franchising? Where'd that come from?
I go to Entrepreneur Magazine. I would read about franchising.
Interesting.
And I'd see these franchise consultants. We're going back in the 90s here. So I'm going to date myself here a little bit. But these franchise consultants used to do these kind of like a discovery day at a hotel, and you'd go and you learn about franchising. And I'd go to these consultant conferences, and they would teach about franchising. And I thought, this is kind of the way I think we need to expand, because I was scared to death to hire people around the country to expand my leagues.
That's great, yeah. And when the beauty of franchise is these are owners. So they're not going anywhere. And it's like you get an employee and all of a sudden, hey, Nick, so-and-so quit. And I go, I don't think I'm going to run your store up in Little Rock, Arkansas. We can't do it. So that's great. Wow.
The big thing I would say, Nick, the reason why we ultimately franchise is, one, I wanted to be first to market because I knew somebody was going to start doing it.
Right.
So I thought speed is the reason why I need to franchise. Second, I can use other people's money because I wasn't well capitalized. And the third reason, and probably most important, is that the skill set of a franchisee was going to be far greater than an employee that I could have afforded. I just could never afford an employee of that caliber that I had.
Totally
my franchise owners are freaking smart people that come from all different walks of life, and they brought their experience from their job into the brand. So that was sort of my start.
And that is the beauty how franchising, it's really a partnership, and how the good franchisees make the franchisor better. And that franchisees should learn from each other and share stories and visit each other's stores as well. But hats off to you, because you kind of created a new niche. I mean, there's not there wasn't a playbook of
a new segment is more difficult than I thought.
That's right. I actually, when I talk to students, I say don't do that, because there's no template, because especially in sports. But at least I say, if you're trying a business, maybe my thing is take somebody's business and make it better, as opposed, because you start from scratch, you just have no idea what you don't know.
Here's the thing: back in 2003, we were trying to create a brand new segment in franchising, and there's 4,000 franchisors out there.
Right.
Number two, we were looking to disrupt a century-old industry, which is not easy, because most of the leagues were nonprofit or run by people that have been running the leagues for years and own the facilities.
Kind of mom and pop.
And the third thing, we would define the odds. 96% of all businesses fail in 5 years. So we had the deck was stacked against us. But I think and probably most importantly, when it came to being the first in franchising to do youth sports programming, was we had to prove the viability that this thing is even really.
Yeah, can you make a living?
Can you make money doing this? Because people didn't believe it.
Yeah, that's not I go, how do they do it?
So we compete. Wait a minute, I'm going to compete with YMCA and Little League, and I would say, yes, you are. Or the other one was, they would say, gosh, you guys do soccer? There's 5 soccer leagues in my area, and you know what my response would be? That's right, and guess what? You are going to be number 6, and you're going to steal their business from them.
Wow.
piece by piece,
Yep.
because you just need a sliver of the market. The market is so huge.
It's big.
Don't
Exactly.
be scared of the guy running a 3,000 kid soccer league. I could guarantee you not every parent is happy, but people have a lower expectation, or they used to have a lower expectation of their sports experience for their kids. You'd ask them, how's your, tell me about the league that you have your kid in, a soccer or a football league. They'd say, well, it's all right. It's run by volunteers. They would start making excuses.
Right.
And I wanted to change that. I wanted to change the perception that you can make money in amateur sports, and secondly, you can make money in amateur sports using other people's facilities and other people's fields.
Wow,
So
that's a big leap. I mean, I hats off to you. I know in restaurants we have franchisees all get all worked up like, oh, there's a Mediterranean restaurant open. I go, don't worry about them. I mean, we know this works, and we've seen other concepts come in. I don't know if you remember Lemonis. Marcus Lemonis had Simple Creek. Oh, they're gonna, and he opened up 30 and then closed 30.
Really?
And that's for me. I always laugh when I see these franchisees coming out. Oh, we're going to open 1,000 stores, and I go, they don't realize, to get to 1 to 5 to 5 to 10, how each level it gets trickier and trickier.
I agree.
Yeah.
Slow and steady.
It
absolutely wins the race,
right.
because if you go too fast, it's like driving the car too fast. You can make mistakes and you can crash.
Right.
And the big thing, you kind of touched on this earlier, I wanted to come back to, is how we relate to our franchisees also changes, in that when you first franchise, you're in training mode, right?
Right.
So my job is to train you and teach you. It's a kind of a one-way street in the beginning. But then there's a change in your franchise system when you start to grow, where you as the franchisor need to start listening to the franchisee, and now you're collaborative.
Yep.
And that two-way street doesn't happen naturally to all of us. It didn't happen naturally to me. And the faster you grow, the harder it is to make that transition, because you're hearing voices from everybody. And if you're not open and receptive to your franchise owners, your morale, your franchisee relationship is going to be a disaster, right?
I think that's a great point. That, my thing would be is, and I remember talking to, there's a guy named Greg Dollarhide who's a great franchisor. He's done several different brands. And I said, what is the key to success? He said, unit economic model. Can they make money at that store level? But then to your point is, the key is that the franchisees are happy. At the end of the day, there's always a little friction because we have different business models, but there's a lot of franchisors that are like, franchisees suck and they don't know what they're doing, and they're like paid. I go, they pay our bills. They are the boss.
They're the only reason why you exist.
But it's incredible how many franchisors out there are so cocky and arrogant. And we had a guy, my brother he was a chief development officer for Arby's and Popeyes, and very high level guy. And he had like a VP for one of these concepts, came to me and said, oh, Nick, I want to do a little Greek up in Kentucky. I go, great. What a background. This guy's been dealing with franchisees his whole career. I go, who's going to run it? Oh, we'll find somebody. I go, you need somebody in there day to day. Well, I got a guy. And
everybody's got a guy.
Yeah, got a guy. And ultimately, it was a failure. Here's one of the most brilliant guys, knows everything inside out, but to be a franchisee, he didn't have the skill set or the desire or the knowledge. And it's one of those things where we have a guy from Greece who has just been a cook, is just a tremendous franchisee because he's hungry and he's in it. It is kind of surprising how sometimes franchisors get this mentality where they look down on franchisees. And I have so much respect for every franchisee because they put all on the line and they're out there every day and they're dealing with they're really, that hats off to them, because that's the ones who really where the rubber hits the road.
Yeah, and we're not going to get along with everybody.
Right.
I mean, we're human.
Right. Yep.
Not everybody's going to be a great fit, and that's probably part of the issue. I hope folks that are listening to this, like an audience of folks that are looking to buy a franchise, realize that not everybody is cut out to be a franchisee.
Right.
Right. I mean, if you are a rule breaker or you don't want to follow rules, you don't want to follow systems, if you're the one that wants to make them, buying a franchise probably isn't for you.
Exactly. And I've told people that. I said, if you want to do that, go create your own Greek restaurant, knock yourself out, but it is interesting how as many franchisees have I come across. I hate to say it, but I can't look at them and say, I know this one's going to make it. I have ideas.
I'm wrong. I was wrong all the time.
Yeah, it's sometimes like, I can't believe that one's doing so well and this one's not doing well. And to your point, there's a lot of stuff that happens in life that we don't even see and realize that there's things going on behind the scenes sometimes that affect them too. And I wish I had that crystal ball. I remember early in my career, I used to be a recruiter for Chili's and Applebee's, and we'd spend millions of dollars doing background checks and psychological and blah, 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 blah. It's still 50-50. And I tell people now, unless that person's worked for you before, or you have a direct, it's a 50-50 deal when you hire somebody if they're going to make it or not, because you just don't know.
Yeah, if the one thing that did help us is using an assessment tool. So we've used Predictive Index for years.
Okay, good.
And I love PI, and not that PI would tell me whether the person would definitely be successful, but the assessment tool pretty much told me if they were not a right fit.
Interesting.
So it did at least rule people out in that if they weren't going to be the right person. Again, though, it doesn't tell you what's going on in their personal life.
Right.
And that would play a factor. But I said earlier, there would be times where like, this guy is going to kill it.
Yeah.
And he didn't. And then another one would be a lady that maybe I didn't think, like, I don't know, she's really busy and, you know, she's got so much going on in her life. And then she absolutely is just a barnstormer, dynamo, crushes it. Yeah. And then the other thing is that as a franchisor, we cannot take for granted or assume that we know what people's expectations are of success.
Right.
An example of that was I had a franchisee in the Northwest, and he was a high flyer. Mm-hmm. And he would say to me, Frank, not everybody is successful as me, and we need to get people more successful. And he used an example of a franchisee that was in North Carolina, like comparing himself to her,
right?
Because he saw her as quote unquote unsuccessful. If you talked to her, she was thrilled.
Right.
She loved the business. Her expectations were being met. She loved it. She was making a lot of money.
Right.
She was making the kind of money that she wanted to make.
Exactly.
She was making a difference in the community.
Right.
She had a great family life. She had everything she wanted.
Yep.
But her expectations were different than his up in the Northwest. But he perceived her to be a failure.
Interesting. There's I can't remember who came up with this, but it's kind of clever. And it's hard for me to learn how everybody looks at things from their perspective.
Right.
And it's hard for people to take, the guy he'd have like a picture frame. He said, okay, the story I would tell is when I was looking at Little Greek, I say, get good advice, but realize that at the end of the day, you have to synthesize good advice from good people for yourself. And I met with a brilliant guy. When I was looking at Little Greek, I brought all the restaurant execs. And unfortunately, in our industry, everybody works together. So Bob Bastian came in, Chris Sullivan from Outback, and Chuck, and I had Ed Drosky, who's one of the Hooters founders. And Ed comes in, food's amazing, this is great, but you need to come up with a really clever, catchy name and sell a lot of and so Ed's trying to give me, but that's his perspective of what made him successful. He's looking from his little deal. So it's really hard sometimes to look at, to your point, the guy from Washington, he's probably a financial guy. He's looking at the numbers, and he doesn't look at it from the other gal who's like, I get like we have just with the guy I saw this morning. I said, Irvin, your prices are a lot lower than everybody. Mr. Nick, I like having my prices lower because I want my customers to be happy. And I'm not in it not in it to make an extra buck or so. And that's a great point, is how everybody's different. And the other thing, I wanted to get your thoughts on this. One of my other mistakes I made when I was at Beef O'Brady's is I initially hired people like me, very social talkers, And so we had a lot of fun, but we didn't get anything done. And then I realized that when you're building a company, you got to hire opposite skills, and they're not going to be your best friend necessarily. The CFO is a different personality than the VP of marketing. The purchasing people, they're kind of quirky as well, and so they all got to work together. But you have to hire this team that, to your point earlier, you're not going to always be best friends, and you got to just work and appreciate it. So,
hit me right where I live.
Yeah.
My number one thing I always said is that hiring for your weakness. Here's what happened to me when I would interview people. Exactly what you would say. Exactly what you said. I would interview people, and I would get caught up in how charismatic they were.
Yeah.
I get caught up in the charisma, and I'm thinking, this guy is going to be great. The problem is that I was liking him too much.
Right.
And in many cases, if he was too much like me, that wasn't good. That wasn't good either.
You're just doubling down on your strengths, and there's nobody covering the weakness.
Yeah. But hiring for your weakness is the number one thing you can do. Yeah. And it truly changed my company around by bringing Brian in. Brian and I were like, we complemented each other.
Right.
We never, 20 years working together, we never argued or fought, but if we had a disagreement on how we thought something should go, we sat down, we figured it out, we heard each other. There was like this incredible mutual respect.
Yep.
Not to mention, I've got to say that it's not every day that you get a chance to work with your mentor. I mean, to hire your mentor, to me, it was like, wow. It was incredible.
He was your mentor? That's cool.
He really was.
Wow, good for you.
He helped me so much to have him on there.
Yeah, what's his background?
It was marketing.
Marketing, okay, wow.
Yep, and marketing and sales. He was chief marketing officer for a publicly traded company.
Wow, high level guy. Good.
So I needed that. I needed the polished, organized, detail-oriented person because I was the crazy visionary founder, and I'd have an idea. I'm like, guys, we're going to do this, or God forbid, I'd go to a Tony Robbins event, and I would come back from a Tony event, and I'd have a laundry list of things that I want to do. Oh, we're going to do this. I mean, my employees were like ducking under the desk.
They're all chasing cats.
Oh God, Frank went to a Tony Robbins event. Look out.
Yeah. Interesting because I had two different directions. One is for my first hire at Laurel Creek was a gal named Jennifer Bajowski, still works for us, and she's the detail person. So we'd have a meeting, and at the end of the meeting, she sent out a little list. Nick, here's what you got to do. Here's what and I go that's where I realized. And when I was running restaurants, I always needed a strong admin person because I'm like you. I'm the high energy front guy, but I needed somebody making sure all the I's were dotted, T's were crossed. And then at Beast, we had Scott Taylor, who's extremely talented, and I had Brian St. George, who makes sure all the legal, because as you know, franchise is all about legal docs. And I'm kind of like whatever, where Brian will read make sure everything's done properly, and that's kind of one of those. So the point would be, though, not just being a high-level executive like you, but even at the very basic level, every employee is important. And I remember one of the stories I tell is we had a receptionist at Beast who we would go on the road and she'd get the whole office in uproar, drama, and this and that. And so every person, and hire slow, fire fast, because if they can make your life miserable and they can cause a lot of damage, you get the wrong people.
Yeah. And the other secret that I felt was a secret to our success is we would do these strat plan meetings. We would do them a couple times a year. And you know who we invited? Everybody. It was an all hands meeting.
Wow.
I wanted everybody in our company to come to a strat meeting.
And franchisees?
Corporate staff.
Right, yeah.
And some of the greatest ideas were from the admin staff, from people who I didn't hear from.
Yeah.
They weren't part of the everyday conversation. In other words, somebody in marketing was giving great ideas on technology and vice versa. And it brought another level of not only expertise, but respect. And also it opened our eyes. My eyes were open. Like, I didn't know this girl was that amazing. We had this gal. She was a young gal named Brandy in marketing years ago. I'll never forget the first strat plan that Brandy was in. She was like dropping gold on us. And I was like, how did I not know this? She's incredible. And the cool thing is, Brandy's with I-9 Sports today.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah.
Well, how do you feel? One thing I feel bad about is, and unfortunately, even at Little Greek, we work out of our house. Do you feel like this whole work from home thing? I do feel it's going to hurt a lot of the younger folks as far as mentoring. That whole idea, cross-pollination, stuff like that. What's your take on that the remote work and people kind of not really working in an office together?
Gosh, I don't want to sound like an old Gen Xer.
Yeah.
I'm a Gen Xer, man. Yeah. I think that there's something about being together.
I think so too.
But I understand that times are changing.
Right.
And I think there has to be some sort of balance. I don't think people have to be in the office 5 days a week.
I agree.
I do agree with that, but I do think there has to be an opportunity for people to have that face-to-face. There's something about that connection. Now, you and I, at the end of the day, we could be wrong.
Right.
And I was talking to another guy about this who does a lot of coaching for executives, and his insight was a little different. He was about our age, but his opinion was different. He said, I believe exact words were, "It doesn't matter what we think. We're not the future generation."
That's true.
And if the next generation is used to working off of their phone, working off an iPad, being on a computer, texting, communicating, via text or just through social media, that's all that matters. In other words, they are the ones that are going to be running the future businesses.
Yeah.
So there is this shift, and how we feel maybe doesn't matter long term.
But my question to him would be, doesn't he feel like that there's a whole social element to being at work, and this becomes a friendship group? And you and I both talked about when you leave your company, how it hurts. And my thing would be is, where do these people get the, like, for instance, when I'm promoting somebody, if I just kind of deal with them over on Zoom calls, I really don't know them. I mean, I don't really see them on a regular basis. And I would tell when I do a lot of, and I'd like to get you going too, is USF guest lectures on the business school. I go, you need FaceTime. I mean, I get the whole work from home. It's it's an hour drive and back and forth, and you got to, I shaved today for you, Frank. I comb my hair, put on a nice shirt, not wearing a sloppy t-shirt that has like spaghetti sauce on it or something like that. But there's younger generation, they need those skills too, because they don't have those skills, I don't think. And so my point to the guy would be, that's fine that they want to do that, but at some point, I've interviewed people or tech people that were working 2 different jobs full time because they get away with it. And my brother was telling me how there's some company we're doing acquisition up in Atlanta, and they said, we'll have our tech guy, Bharat, he'll call your tech guy. Our tech guy's Bharat. It was the same guy. He was working 2 jobs.
Wow.
And so
that's the future, possibly, though, Nick.
But I think, there's a certain percent of the people can manage themselves, but there are a lot of people that they don't have the discipline, I don't think, to get up, go to work, and I wonder about productivity. And we at Little Creek we work out of the house, and I always wonder are they that, because when they're in the office, I can tell if they're busy or not and what's going on, and you monitor. But I guess I'm not a babysitter either. So that's
I might not be the right person, but I'll give you an example. This was back in about 2013, and we had everybody in the office. Of course, this many years pre-COVID, and I'll never forget, we had an in-house customer service center before we ended up outsourcing it.
Right.
So we had it in-house. We tried this out, and it was going well. We had about 28 customer service center people, and I'll never forget, I walked by, and we had these cubicles. Even the leadership team, we had these big cubicles and stuff, and I walked past one of our customer service reps that was watching a movie on Netflix. And my eyes were probably as big as saucers.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, I walked over to Brian's office. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. So-and-so is watching a movie on Netflix. And he goes, well, you know what? Look, I get it. It's wrong. It's wrong. Well, I'm going to talk to the supervisor. At the time, talking to the supervisor was like, well, the person knows to, answer the phone when the phone's ringing, he or she needs to answer the phone. But there's something about it to me that was just wrong. I didn't do that. How am I as the founder? I'm building this company. You would have never, ever saw me on my laptop watching Netflix. But it's different.
We have employees in the restaurants during a shift, and it's sometimes busy. They're looking at their phone. I go, you're working, and how can you have your phone? You're like checking texts or whatever. I go, it's just unbelievable. It's a different, and I don't want to. My kids are there, and I get it, but it just be interesting. And I'm sure that there's always this generational thing. That's that one consultant was saying is that, hey, that's the future. So be it.
And the consultant also said is that despite people working from home, the thought that they're not getting work done, productivity is actually higher. The percentage of productivity is greater now that more people work from home. But it feels wrong is the problem, right?
Yep. Well, because both of us have talked about how part of building a company is the bond that you create with your staff, and it's a family.
Yes.
And if you're doing it remote, that's not there. I mean, it's kind of
So one of the ideas is to building that culture and building that rapport with your employees remotely is to actually have those Zoom calls where you're talking about everything not about business.
That's probably a good call. Yeah.
You've got to know each other, right? And if you think about your best relationships in your best professional relationships, you know about the person. Right. Look, you know about my wife, Nadine. You know about Frankie
the third. Yes.
Frankie the third, and my daughter telling me, you know my family, but we got to know each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's where people don't do remote work correctly, is when they do it incorrectly, when they don't spend the time. You have to invest the time in your staff, because at the end of the day, you want the best possible person. Brian and I had a big challenge in that we were so hell-bent in franchise sales in having the person in-house, the VP.
Right.
We felt like they needed to breathe, eat, drink, sleep franchising. And if they weren't going to capture the culture unless they worked in the office. And Brian and I went through a lot of interviews. We kissed a lot of frogs.
Right.
Because we were forcing them to work in Tampa in the office. And so we didn't hire a lot of people. And then ultimately we end up outsourcing it. That didn't work. And then we end up hiring people remotely, and we have this fantastic people that are selling award-winning franchises at I9 Sports, but they're not in-house.
Wow.
So it turned out it was the best possible people was more important than having people that could live in the Tampa Bay area.
That's a good point. Good point. What? Where was your office at?
In Riverview.
Okay.
It started in Brandon, and then we moved to Riverview, and it's been in Riverview since 2012.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
It is interesting how life changes and things change fast. So that and as you get older, it's even franchisees are resistant to change, and so we interested to see how everything all shakes out, and then the whole AI. I don't know where that's going to go, but you always wonder. For instance, on our end for the restaurant side, this whole delivery thing came out of nowhere, and next thing you know, we were doing, pre-COVID, maybe 16% of our sales were Uber Eats, DoorDash. Now it's 35%.
Wow.
So we don't, you go to the restaurants and they're doing huge sales, so it's not that busy in-house, and like, what's going on? But what's happened, we've had to raise our prices on those delivery apps 30% because that's what they charge us, and our restaurant margins are so tight we can't afford to eat it. So it's interesting to see, and we've also, it's interesting, I brought you the food over, they knocked the bags now because drivers were eating the food, and so it's just crazy how these things you'd never anticipate having to deal with in life, and stuff happens.
Yeah.
And certainly COVID, what a crazy time that was.
Oh, yeah. Well, at I-9 Sports, we had a complete shutdown, of course.
Wow.
I mean, they couldn't be together playing in sports leagues. And then some of the schools had ridiculous rules if you wanted to play it. Like the kids had to be, 6 feet from each other. How can you play soccer 6 feet from each other? A 3-year-old can't even kick a ball 6 feet.
Too much. That's hilarious.
It was like, okay, you could have 10 kids on the field, and they all have to be at least 6 feet away from each other. Okay, that's not going to happen. Yeah. But what about Little Greek? How did you guys get through?
We were fortunate because our model going in was small stores, all cash investment, don't borrow a bunch of money, and we were already built for, we were doing 50% takeout anyhow, 50% eat, and we're very fortunate. Our menu is pretty broad where we have a good, the pita sandwiches and salads for lunch, and we have the platters for dinner, so we had a good mix of equal lunch and equal dinner. Most restaurant concepts are either strong at lunch or strong at dinner. So we actually did very well. We were most of our stores in Florida and Texas, and so for us, ironically, it was a very difficult time, but it was our owners really benefited well. I mean, the PPP money was this windfall, and we were well set up. Brian St. George set up. We were selling people, you need toilet paper, ground beef, we'll sell you whatever. Just keep the doors open. And we were lucky that way where, we had stores up in Chicago and they were shut down for quite a bit. That was quite painful. Mm. Yeah.
What would you say now to somebody that's an aspiring franchisee of Little Greek? Mm-hmm. Tell me, what do you think?
Well, certainly the key for us is, if you're hungry and passionate, it's a great opportunity. And, definitely, unfortunately, in some of our bigger markets, we're losing all the prime spaces are gone, and so find a good spot. But
do you guys help find the spot?
Oh yeah. So in the restaurant business, part of it, you come in on board. We help you find. We help do the site location. We help you with the lease negotiation. We help you with the design, construction. Now we're over. We got to get a general contractor, but we help you with that. We have an opening team. We train you, and we bring the opening team in. For me, on the after that though, it's once you're up and running, to get them open is the hardest. And once they're running, then we just see slow, steady sales keep going up every year. And they're, we see, I focus on the 3 or 4 stores maybe struggling, and then hopefully, and it's kind of cool. Some of them during COVID pulled out because all the full service guys shut down, so they picked up the business. So my thing if you're looking to be a franchisee Little Greek, you need to be prepared to be in the trenches, we call it. You need to be in there, learn the business top to bottom. And if you say, hey, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to be at home and I'm going to hire my cousin, and that's not a good fit. Right. But if you love, I also like, when I interview people or, franchisee, if you're eating the food, no, I said, you need to eat the food. Because if you don't like it or love it, that's not, if you're going to be there every day, you got to really believe in it and be kind of bleed Little Greek.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, how do you guys separate yourself from the other quick serve restaurants? Yeah.
Greek. It is interesting because we do see competitors, and unfortunately, I'd say our food is really good. And we do. I remember I had a guy come in from Five Guys, and he goes, I've looked at every concept out there, and this is the first concept where every item I ate was good. And I just, I check out all of our competitors, and and this is, it works, and the numbers work where we can see our sales keep going up, and we see competitors sometimes fall by the wayside. Now there's some good competitors, and they do fine, and I think there's plenty of room for everybody. We have a wonderful. Hopefully, you guys, you and Anthony get to do some research and try the food.
We will.
But we do, we do a lot of scratch cooking. It's a very complex menu. That's one thing too. If you said like a beef is kind of open up the box, drop it in the fryer, right. And we're here, you're slicing, dicing, we're breaking down lamb. We're cutting up chicken breast into multiple pieces, and we're marinating, and we're chopping veggies, and our Dolmati's recipe, 17 steps. So it's a pretty complex operation, and so it's hard for your basic mom and pop to come in and replicate a lot of that. And now I will give Sigrid, my partner, did a nice job of kind of Americanizing the food a little bit, so it's not quite as intense Greek. So when you taste our salad dressing, it's not a true Greek vinaigrette. It's a little sweeter, milder flavor profile. So hopefully you guys, I'd like to get your feedback too as well.
Yeah.
So the food wins. I mean, you look at our Yelp reviews, and part of what we do to monitor our stores is we look at the Google and Yelp reviews to see what's going on out there, and clearly and you can see which owners really operate at a high level too.
That's great. Yeah. If somebody wanted to get more information on Little Greek, how can they find you?
I would say go to our website. It's mylittlegreek.com. There's
mylittlegreek.com.
Yeah, some little Greek guy actually got Little Greek. So we're but if you Google me, Nick Voinovich, Google Little Greek. Our stores have my phone number on the door. Call me. Call Frank. He'll get you. He'll get me.
Absolutely. Okay, so I want to finish this with I call it the tip jar. So since franchising is so generous, the community is always willing to give information. What would you say to an aspiring entrepreneur that's looking to franchise their concept? What's a tip or trick?
Well, I think the key would be go like what Greg Dollarhide said first. And I'm going to be thinking remember my little frame of reference is restaurants. What's your unit economic model? Or what's your food cost, labor cost? Or if I'm a franchisee and you're charging a franchisee 5% royalty or 6% or whatever, can they make enough money based on their investment to make it worthwhile? So that's kind of, unfortunately, you have a different, I have no idea how you guys put that thing together. And so on my end, and actually one of my friends who's a banker, I'm meeting, because I try to mentor and help out like you do, other folks. And so I'm meeting a group next week and just say, hey, that's the first thing I'd say is, what are your sales? If you're not doing high level sales, you have to do a certain level of sales to make the money that they need to make. So look at the business model first, and then look at do you feel passionate about it? Look at the team, and do you fit with the corporate staff as well? Because that's a big part of it. So when I tell people, like, for instance, when you're interviewing, you should be interviewing them as well to make sure it's a good fit, because franchising, it's a 10-year, 20-year deal. These are for life, and they're not going anywhere. So good luck. And my thing is, hats off to all you entrepreneur franchisees out there, because it's a noble thing. I will tell you that one other thing, and you probably know this too. Once you work for yourself, you can't go work for somebody else again.
Oh, there's no going back.
You can't go on vacation, or you don't want to go. So it is kind of the beauty is when you run your own business, it's your own business, good or bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Nick,
what a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Going. Come on, Frank. Give me another hour. Come on. Anthony.
We'll have to do a Joe Rogan experience, a 3-hour
How
next time
about
we're
Nick
out.
Voinovich take 2?
I love it.
Thanks so much. So good to see you, man.
Take care. See you.
Yep,
Bye. Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.